Hello, welcome back to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified enterprise coach, and a certified team coach from Scrum Alliance. We create these videos to help you understand the Scrum concepts in an easy way so that you can implement them in your Scrum projects. Today, we are going to discuss about developers, one of the accountabilities of the Scrum team. In Scrum team, there will be 3 accountabilities: Scrum Master, developers, and product owner. So the reason why we call this as developers is people who build or develop something of value in Scrum, which is called as an increment. So the developers are committed to create the increment. So what are the accountabilities? First, the developers create usable or valuable increment, which creates the value to the customers or users or stakeholders. So the developers have domain specific skills. Domain specific skills means, for example, if you are building a software product, then the developers will have programming skills, testing skills, database skills, or architecture skills, or some integration skills, UI, UX skills, something like that. Whereas if you are building a marketing product using Scrum, then the developers may include a content writer, a graphic designer, a data analyst, or a campaign strategist like that. If you are constructing a house using Scrum, maybe the developers include masons, electricians, plumbers, painters, interior decorators, like that. So that is what is called domain specific skills. So developers also accountable for creating the sprint backlog. So first day of the sprint planning happens. So the product owner comes with the prioritized product backlog. The developers will collaborate with the product owner and understands along with Scrum Master, they create a sprint goal. The Scrum team will create a sprint goal. According to the sprint goal, based on the prioritization, the developers will choose the amount of work, how many product backlog items can be pulled into the sprint backlog for implementation, which will be created as into sprint backlog. And sprint backlog is owned by developers. So once the sprint backlog is created, which includes the sprint goal, that means why we are doing the sprint work, and the selected PBI items, that means what are the items that will achieve the sprint goal, and then how, a high level plan. So these 3 things will be part of the sprint backlog. During the sprint, the developers will implement those items, and developers are accountable for adhering to the definition of done. That means any item the developers are building in the sprint, they have to make sure each item is satisfying the definition of done, which is a quality criteria checklist. Something like all the acceptance test must pass, unit testing is done, code review done, automation testing is done, functional testing is done, zero defects are there, and then code review done, code review implementation is done, like that, some quality criteria checklist. So every item the developers are implementing in the sprint should adhere to the definition of done. And the developers also accountable for inspecting the daily progress and plan the work. So developers should be self-managing. So during the daily Scrum, they inspect the progress towards the sprint goal based on the work done by all the developers during the sprint. And then they make a plan for the next day and also discuss the impediments. Those are the things that will be taken care by the developers. Also, developers should be professionally hold each other accountable. So all the developers professionally accountable for each of the developers in the team. These are the developers' primary accountabilities. Now, what are the developers' interactions? So if you look at the sprint structure, so the sprint is a fixed unit of time within less than or equal to 1 month. So the sprint will come up with different events inside the sprint. So sprint is called as a container event. First day planning, everyday daily Scrum, last day review, and then retrospective. So in between, the time available is for the execution of the items. So somewhere middle of the sprint, they will do the product backlog refinement activity. So sprint planning, daily scrum, review, retrospective, these are called as events, and the PBR is called as an activity. So throughout the sprint, developers will primarily have interactions with 3 groups of people. 1, product owner, 2, stakeholders, 3, scrum master. So for product owner, developers will primarily have 2 things. 1, any clarifications during the sprint related to the current sprint backlog items, the developers will approach to product owner. 2, any item which is done in the sprint backlog, they have to show it to the product owner for the product owner's approval. These are the 2 primary interactions apart from the Scrum events interactions. For example, sprint planning, product owner, developer, Scrum master will be there. Daily Scrum primarily for developers, but if developers need the presence of the product owner, they can invite the product owner. That is another interaction. Or if product owner is contributing in terms of the coding or testing or anything related to the current sprint items, then also he will join as a developer, not as a product owner. And then again, sprint review, they will have interactions with the product owner, scrum master, developers along with stakeholders. And then sprint retrospective also. Product backlog refinement also, the product owner, developers interactions will happen. Now, developers can also interact with the stakeholders directly in case they need any clarifications, maybe in the absence of product owner, or the product owner may direct the developers to the stakeholders to get clarifications. So that also possible. And the stakeholders will be coming to the sprint review. So there also developers will have interactions. And then during the sprint, developers also interact with the Scrum Master for any organizational, systemic or global impediments resolution, or if they need any kind of facilitation support, coaching support, or any training support, or anything related to Scrum implementation, they will interact with the Scrum Master. So these are the collaborative, highly transparent, engaging interactions with the developers and the other people. Now, what are the responsibilities and rights of the developers? First, let us look at the responsibilities. So create a sprint backlog for the sprint in collaboration with the product owner and Scrum Master during the sprint planning. Estimate the product backlog items so that it will be helpful for the product owner to come up with some forecasting. Then collaborate with the PO for clear requirements, because if the requirements are not clear, then the product may not be coming as right product. So it is the responsibility of the developers to ask questions, clarifications during the PBR or sprint planning, or whenever the requirements discussion are happening according to the product backlog items. Then instill quality by adhering to the definition of done. So whatever items that are done during the sprint, the developers are responsible to ensure that each item is meeting the entire criteria definition of done. And then tracking the progress of the sprint work, maybe using the burn-up chart or burn-down chart or cumulative flow diagram or any other tool. The developers are responsible for tracking the progress of the sprint work. And then create architecture to deliver a usable increment, the right architecture. Then participate actively in Scrum events. So all the Scrum events, sprint planning, daily Scrum review, retrospective, responsibility as developers, along with the product owner and developers. But for daily Scrum, only developers. Product owner and Scrum Master optional. Identify required infra and tools for the development. Depending upon the need, what kind of technology or what kind of infrastructure or tools required, developers should be supporting. And then reach out to product owner or stakeholders for clarifications during the sprint without waiting. So that means as and when any clarification is required, developers should be proactively talking to the product owner or stakeholders so that it will avoid the delays. And then works as a team to achieve the sprint goal rather than an individuals. And help each other as and when needed during the sprint, because all the developers are accountable to complete the work they have pulled into the sprint backlog. So each and every developer should work with each other. and plan and organize their work on their own. That means assigning the items, all these things should be taken care by the developers without any third-party intervention or even Scrum Master or product owner involvement. And then assign the work with the developers on their own. That is another responsibility. And then hold themselves accountable as professional to deliver value. These are the responsibilities of the developers. Then what are some rights of the developers? First one, decide how much work can be pulled into the sprint backlog. That means product owner will prioritize the product backlog items. Based on the prioritization, how much amount of work, that means how many product backlog items or how many story points worth of items can be pulled into the sprint backlog is decided by the developer. So they can use the past performance like last 2 to 3 sprints, best, worst, average, velocity, and current sprint capacity, all these things. Based on that, they will decide. No one can intervene or no one can force them to take more work than they can do in a sprint. And then right to provide estimates without being overruled. That means in the backlog refinement or during the sprint planning, when estimations are happening, the developers decide the estimates for the product backlog items. Neither product owner nor Scrum Master nor anyone else should oppose their estimates. And then right to clear transparent product backlog items. Developers have a right to expect the detailed right requirement, at least whatever they are going to implement in the next 1 or 2 sprints. And then right to refuse to mark PBI as done if it is not meeting the definition of done. That means if somebody asks, okay, for now, even though it is not done, okay, let's consider it is done. Then the developers have a right to say, no, it is not done. We don't mark it as done. That is the right. Because they have a responsibility of instill the quality. So they have a right to say no when it is not meeting the definition of done. Right to choose how the progress is tracked. So the responsibility is to track the progress, whereas what kind of tool they have to use, they can choose the tool on their own. If they don't know, they have the right to ask to the Scrum Master to teach some tools. And then owns technical and design and architectural related decisions. No one can intervene or ask them to do any suboptimal work in that area. Then right to productive, purposeful events, not just status meetings. So these are inspection and adaptation opportunities, the Scrum events, sprint planning, daily Scrum review, retrospective. So they have to be conducted like that rather than status meetings. And developers have a right to get suitable and sufficient infrastructure to develop the product. Maybe if they want some automation infrastructure or they need to do some performance testing infrastructure. So they have a right to get that suitable, sufficient infrastructure on time. And then timely access to the product owner and stakeholders during the sprint in case they need any clarifications or questions, or they have some assumptions they want to quickly validate with the product owner or stakeholders. They have a right to get their availability during the sprint. And then right to be treated as a single unit instead of individuals, like silos. These are the 2 testing people, these are the 3 programming people, this one person is the UI person. Not like that, rather than one single unit, so that the accountability also will be at the team level. And then the developers have a right to expect mutual collaboration and support within the team. That is related to, again, professionally accountable. And then right to autonomy without external micromanagement. Then developers also have right to self-assign free from external allocation from product owner or somebody or Scrum Master. So who is going to work on which backlog item, which task, the developers have the right to decide on their own. No one can intervene in their decisions. And push back on unrealistic expectations or shortcuts, even from Scrum Master or product owner or stakeholders or management. So when these responsibilities and rights are taken care, the developers will be giving high quality product increments and they'll be more transparent and more collaborative. Now, what are some characteristics of the developers? So in order to execute the rights and responsibilities, there need to be some characteristics. The very first one is trust within the developers. Then accountable as a team, as a group, not as an individuals. Then cross-functional. The developers should be having cross-functional skills. Then developers should be able to self-manage. That means the work they have taken into the sprint backlog should be able to self-managing without any external or third person involvement or contributions. And then the developers should be honest in what they are doing, what they are saying. And also developers should have the commitment towards the sprint goal. And then they should be creative in coming up with innovative ideas and solutions for problems. And developers always should be demonstrating transparency, whether it is coming to the challenges or progress or blockers or whatever they are facing. They have to be transparent in what they are doing. And also developers should demonstrate discipline, maybe in terms of attending the Scrum events or updating the sprint progress time to time, or approaching for any support from related to organizational or systemic. So discipline. Then some of other characteristics, communication, either within the developers or between the product owner and developers or Scrum Master developers or Scrum Master developers, product, any within the Scrum team or outside the Scrum team. Effective communication is another characteristic, important characteristic. And then developers should demonstrate teamwork. So they have to work as a team. So that is the power of contribution. And then developers also should be collaborative with each other and also with the product owner and Scrum Master. And one more, developers should be flexible for taking care of quick decisions or helping each other when somebody is absent, taking care of their work or giving some help. Those are the things. And then another important thing for developers is the competency, technical competency, architectural competency. These are some important characteristics required for developers to be more effective. And there is something called as I-shaped and T-shaped developers. So what is the difference? This person is called as I-shaped person. The reason is he has only one skill, but it is his primary skill. For example, he is a Java developer. So he can do anything with Java. He is very, very proficient with Java, and any requirement related to Java, he can do easily. But he can do only Java. He doesn't do anything else. So imagine if you have a Java expert, a HTML expert, a UI expert, a database expert, and maybe automation expert like that in a team. There are some fundamental problems. Number one, if one person is absent in a sprint, because others don't have that skill, they'll be handicapped. That means they're highly dependent on each other. Two, they don't talk to each other because there is no common skill. Three, for example, being a database person, if he has work only 60% or 70% of database work, what does that person do remaining 30 to 40%? Sit idle. So the right side person is called as T-shaped person. T-shaped person means in addition to the primary skill, for example, Java, he is a star in Java. He can do anything with Java. But in addition to Java, he has a couple of secondary skills. For example, he may be doing manual testing. He may not be star, but at least he can contribute. Maybe taking the happy path test cases and then execute and create a report and give to the developers. Or maybe contributing to the database programming. He may not be star in the database, but he can contribute at least minimum kind of database objects like triggers, stored procedures, or maybe tables, something like that. They can contribute, right? So that means the concept here is, instead of creating specialists, we are trying to create generalized specialists. That is the concept of this T-shaped skills. So the Scrum Masters will generally help the people to develop the secondary skills and transform from I-shaped to T-shaped, so that the developers will have more flexibility and less risk of depending on one person, and one person's code can be reviewed by other person. These kind of things can be easily implemented, and the quality of the increment also will be increased. So it also helps them to develop more rapport, because people with T-shaped skills will have common skills across multiple people. They communicate more often, and that will help you to build the trust and transparency. So this is what is called I-shaped and T-shaped. But Scrum does not insist that every person in the developer should be T-shaped. A combination of I-shaped and T-shaped should also work, as long as it is not leading to too much risk, too much dependency, something like that. That is what about developers. I hope you have liked this. And if you are looking for any public or private Agile, Scrum, Safe and artificial intelligence related trainings, please approach to us. We are happy to help. And thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck.